Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the CSBG Organizational Standards Webinar, Part 2. I'm Peggy Gleason, Administrative Project Assistant for Community Action Partnership of Oregon. Most of you are familiar with our presenter, Ken Ackerman. Ken is the creator and manager of virtualcap.org, which launched in 2002, and it's a great resource for community action agencies around the nation. His involvement with community action began in 1971 as a VISTA volunteer in rural Virginia. Ken served as executive director of a community action agency in Virginia for almost 25 years after initially working as the agency's chief planner. He's a certified peer reviewer for the Award for Excellence, Pathways to Excellence in Community Action, and has provided interim management assistance and direct TNTA to community action agencies across the U.S. This presentation is supported by funding through Oregon Housing and Community Services, CSBG funds. I'd like to go over a few things before we start. First of all, we have muted all attendees to avoid feedback problems. For audio, you have your choice of using the telephone call-in number or your computer microphone and speakers. When using your computer, a USB headset is recommended. You can switch between telephone and computer audio at any time during the webinar. If you're having trouble hearing or viewing the presentation or wish to ask a question, you can do so by typing a message in the question area at the bottom of the control panel. Click on Send Message to Staff, and then click Send. I'll respond to any questions that I'm able to during the presentation. Ken will pause occasionally to answer questions specifically for him, and he'll allow time for questions at the end of the webinar. If you prefer to ask a question at the end of the presentation by using your audio, click on Raise Hand, which is a button on the Grab tab at the top left side of your control panel, and I will unmute you. There'll be a copy of the full presentation with live links sent out by email after the completion of the webinar. At the end of the webinar, we'll also be sending a link to a short survey. This will be sent by email. Please take a minute or two to offer your feedback. It's very helpful to us in planning future webinars. And in addition, for this session, we've added a question asking what you believe to be the most difficult categories for compliance. Capo is very pleased to offer Ken's webinar. I'll go ahead and hand the controls over to him, and I hope you all enjoy the presentation.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Peggy. I'd like to express my appreciation to Capo and to EHCS for the opportunity to be with you today and to present this information. Most of you were on our Part 1 webinar on the organizational standards. If you're new or weren't able to attend that one, we do have copies of it available, which we can send to you if you would like to receive that. So on your screen, you have a listing of the topics we're covering today. It's really the same format as we did 2 weeks ago. It's categories 1 through 5. There will be a quick overview of the organizational standards themselves, and then sharing with you the national tools that are available and very helpful for you to use and hopefully take advantage of, and then get into the nitty-gritty of the last 4 standards. Each one will go through the same format. I'll share with you the technical assistance guides and webinars that have been put together for each standard, the assessment scale, which really in the middle of it shows what's necessary to comply with the standard, but then it goes farther than that, encouraging agencies to really strive toward excellence and move toward outstanding on these scales. There will be examples of documentation under each of the standards, and finally, the resources that the partnership has put together, along with a few others that I have identified to help with compliance. So before we get started, I'd like to launch a poll here so we can see the roles that you are involved with your agencies. And so I'm going to launch this poll, and if you take a moment, please, to indicate whether you're a board member, an executive director, chief executive officer, etc. I'd like to just get a glimpse of that as we move along. Okay, it'll take maybe 10 more seconds here, and I will share the results with you. Okay, anybody still wanting to put their 2 cents in here? I'll give you 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3, and we are closing. Okay. Interesting. So the results, as you can see them, we have a handful of board members, some finance, HR, and planning staff, a few executive directors, and then other staff involved with this process. So it's interesting, we will be covering 2 of the 4 standards today relate to human resources and another one to fiscal operations. So hopefully those of you who don't have someone in those areas attending, please do share this material with them. Okay, going back here. So the basic organizational standards are issued under CSBG Information Memorandum 138. The blue links on these slides are live, so when you get a copy of the PDF of the presentation, you'll be able to open any of the materials that are being shared with you this morning. And as I said earlier, today's webinar is covering categories 6 through 9, and you can see the categories have 3 groupings. Maximum feasible participation, which we covered 2 weeks ago. Vision and direction, we covered 2 of the 3 under that. And finally, operations and accountability, which we'll be covering all 3 categories today under that last one. One thing I will point out is that there are 58 standards for private nonprofit agencies and only 50 for publics. So basically the 50 do overlap within the 58, and the public agencies that may be on this call can certainly get the same information we have here. Now I see a note here, someone's having a hard time hearing me speak. I'm going to try to put the volume up on this. Also, I would encourage you to increase the volume on your speakers or your phone. If you're still having a problem, please let me know. And if it continues to be that way, I'll call in on a telephone and see if that helps you hear better. Okay? Okay, let me know if you still have a problem hearing. So the national tools that you'll be able to access are shown here on the bulleted points. There's the link at the top, the Center of Excellence Developed Tools. So each of these will be available through that primary link there. Rather than give you multiple links, I just gave you that one. And we're going to go through each of these bullets on separate slides. First one has to do with self-assessment tools. Hopefully you're familiar with these. There is a tool that goes through each of the categories. It gives you some general guidance on what the standard involves. It gives you some listings of the type of documentation you might use to indicate your compliance with it. If you haven't fully met the standard, you can indicate where you are in getting there and what steps you're taking to actually meet that standard. And as we did in the last webinar, I'm very interested in seeing the degree that your agency has started or completed a self-assessment. So if you would please indicate, gives us a good example of where we are today. And I understand this is a work in progress in Oregon, so we understand that not everyone will be 100% finished with it. Okay, you have about 3/4 that have indicated where they are with it. I'll give you a few more seconds here if you want to add yours to this. Okay, I don't know if I should do a countdown again. 3, 2, 1. Ready? One more second. And we're closing it. Okay, so I'll share with you the results there. And you can see about 1/3 have started but not finished. We have about 1/4 who have finished and another 1/4 that haven't started. So hopefully once you finish hearing what we had to offer today, you can go ahead and open the self-assessment tool and get going on, or keep going, depending on where you are in the process. And then 2 other tools which are really useful. One is a glossary of terms under each of the categories. That's a good one to give some clarification. And really one that I think is vital is to look at this calendar of required actions, because the standards vary in terms of how often they need to be addressed. Some of them are ongoing, others are more than once a year, and then we have the remaining ones that happen every 1, 2, 3, 5 years. So this is a really helpful layout for you. You can use it and track how you're doing with the standards.
Ken, we're still seeing the poll results.
Oh my. Okay. Well, it hasn't changed, has it? Okay. Thank you, Peggy. Every time I click the control panel, it seems to knock my PowerPoint out of full screen. So it's not my intention to do that. Anyway, we noticed that we had some board members on, and others, certainly you have boards in your agency, so please share this information with them. The image on the left is of one of the videos that had been put together by the Community Action Partnership specifically for agency boards. There's an overview and then a separate video for each of the 9 standards. One thing I'll say is that these videos are really helpful for anyone to review a particular standard that or a category, I should say, that you're working on. As it says, they're only about 8 minutes long, so if you want a quick overview of the standards under each category, I really encourage you to look at this. On the right upper image is a 2-page summary for boards reflecting the areas of responsibility that the organizational standards have put over onto the board's responsibilities. It's a good 2-page summary, and finally a calendar specifically of those items requiring board actions. Here are 2 bodies of work that the state CSBG lead agencies, and I understand Oregon will be using these national tools to do the assessments that they're involved with, as well as to detail the technical assistance plans that will be instituted in areas where compliance is not quite occurring in various agencies. So that's good for you to see what they use as well. Okay, I'll take a deep breath, and we're about to take off into the standards themselves. There are 4 today. The first one has to do with strategic planning. Strategic planning, to me, is really a big part of the backbone of an organization. It pulls everything together. Some of the standards that we went over, particularly the consumer input and involvement, the needs assessment, et cetera, all of this factors into strategic planning as well. So you'll see there's quite a bit of cross-referencing as we go from one category to another, and this one in particular certainly touches or moves across many of the categories besides Category 6 itself. As hopefully you're aware, strategic planning is a major emphasis under the ROMA process. The second stage of ROMA is planning, and strategic planning is where that comes in. But truly, strategic planning encompasses the entire ROMA process, because you need your needs assessment, which is the first phase, assessment, to begin strategic planning. And then you need the remaining phases as well, as you'll see on standards after Standard 1. Standard 6.2 talks about reducing poverty, revitalizing communities, empowering low-income people, which is part of the ROMA framework. And Standard 6.3 encompasses the family, agency, and community goals. So ROMA is very much aligned as part of strategic planning. Another concept that I'm sure all of you are familiar with through your agencies, and that is the theory of change concept, which is a great launching point to move into strategic planning, to determine what type of changes your agency wants to prioritize happening to in your community, both to families and on a community level, as well as your agency, and then building a plan to work toward those changes. So let's move into the specific standards. As I mentioned at the beginning, there are assessment scales for each one. This is how they look in the technical assistance guides. Basically, it outlines the continuum from unacceptable, moving up to satisfactory, which is compliance, and to outstanding, which is moving toward excellence. And, you know, I meant to do one more poll, so while we're here talking about the technical assistance guides, the last poll for a while now has to do with whether or not you've accessed the technical assistance guides or webinars. So if you would, let me know if you've had a chance to do that yet. And I really strongly encourage looking at both the technical assistance guides and the webinars in the particular categories that you will be active in as part of your work with the organizational standards. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds here. Have about 3/4 folks have shown their level of involvement with this. Okay, ready? I'm about to close it out. And there you go. So you can see about 60% have and about 40% haven't. So again, that's just a quick way to give you a little gentle encouragement to take advantage of the really excellent materials that are available to help with the work here. Standard 6.1 has to do with having a strategic plan. And it's interesting, as I've been at many conferences over the years and visited state associations and local agencies, there are agencies that have not done strategic planning in the past, which is surprising to me, or have done it in a very perfunctory way. So truly the standards under this category lay out a very strong process, which you can learn more about and make it as strong as possible for your agency, to start with the strategic plan that will really point you in a direction to affect change and to have some strong results in the work that's being done. So this standard here talks about having a plan approved by your board within the past 5 years. Now, you see the continuum. I'm not going to go through them. It's just a reminder to look at them and use them. But examples of documentation, well, an obvious one is having a copy of the plan. I would encourage putting a date that the plan is completed and adopted by your board on the cover or in the front pages of the plan, so it's well documented. And then secondly, of course, having minutes from your board document that they have formally approved the plan. So if you look at the resources here, the ones that are starred with asterisks are ones that come from the technical assistance guides that the partnership has available to you. And you can see there are 3 here from that guide. And actually, I must confess, I was the one who helped them identify some under this standard. It's an area that I was active in. So you'll see there's a great toolkit from the Illinois Community Action State Association. There's another one from a guide from the Texas CSBG office. And finally, on virtual CAP itself, you can see that link there. You'll not only get some additional tools that you might find useful, but more importantly, from my standpoint, you'll also get some examples of strategic plans that other community action agencies have developed. I try to keep that up to date. It's not exhaustive by any means, but trying to pull some good ones together that will give you some examples that you might use and adapt for your agency, or at least see the process and the components that they included in their plans. A couple of other good pieces, actually, the one directly under the virtual CAP items there is a webinar that was just, or a workshop, I'm sorry, that was just done in January at the National Community Action Partnerships Management and Leadership Conference. So this one really is helpful and very timely in that it has been out a month, or just about a month. The last one is also from the partnership, a guide to strategic planning and direction. So all these are really good. I think it's a good starting point for Standard 6.1. 6.2 then gets into the particulars of the strategic plan, talking about addressing reduction of poverty, revitalization of low-income communities, and or empowerment of people with low incomes to become self-sufficient. So this very much comes out of the CSBG federal legislation. That language, if you read the Act, the CSBG Act, you'll find it in there. And it really intends to connect all the programs and services that your agency undertakes to create an overarching framework for your agency to be focusing on one or more of these elements. In your one thing that's key to this is as you develop your strategic plan is to very clearly show how your plan addresses one or more of these areas. It doesn't mean you need separate sections on these areas or even to have them as headings, but there needs to be some clarity in terms of what you're doing, achieving one or more of these areas, as I've said. Another part about this is to consider what I mentioned a few moments ago, theory of change, which Oregon is active in, and to use that as a launching point to align your work with these particular objectives. Okay. You can see the documentation. You can, as I mentioned a moment ago, you can explicitly incorporate one of them listed in the standard, or you can basically have a section in your plan that will explain how what you're doing addresses the standard. So some resources, you can see the partnership has provided some, particularly in the area of bundled services and service integration in terms of the work, focusing on the areas that were covered in the standard. The Learning Community Resource Center, which is at the top, does have a learning community on bundled services. So I think all three of those really weave together in a similar fashion. I've tried to build that out. I do have a webinar recording here that you can access on developing a strategic plan. Also, an interesting toolkit that was put together by the partnership with Eastern Idaho Community Action Partnership is building a Roma-based strategic plan. The agency that was involved with that, Eastern Idaho CAP, was the Pathways to Excellence Award for Excellence winner a few years ago. And in reaching that award, they documented what they did in terms of the work in their agency, and this strategic plan is a piece of that. And finally, not foreign to Oregon, because Washington State, same region, put out a case study on theory of change. Interesting. Okay, I'm seeing a message saying the links on the partnership website are currently dead links. I'll have to double check that, okay? So I have not had that problem, and I understand it might be a more recent situation. So I'll check that before we send out the copy of the slides. Okay. Okay, Standard 6.3, again, is directly aligned to Roma, talking about family, agency, and/or community goals. The or is in there suggesting that to comply, you don't need to do all three. Of course, to really look at the level of work that you're doing and the results that you're trying to achieve, it's encouraged that you consider doing all three, and I think many agencies certainly are. But at any rate, you see the three areas there aligned with Roma. And documentation is pretty basic, showing how the strategic plan links with one of those goals. I put the resources directly on this page. You can see them in terms of creating goals and objectives, having a Roma-based strategic plan, yet once again from Eastern Idaho CAP, and finally the Tennessee State CAP Association put together a guide about, gosh, it's been over 10 years ago, but it does link the Roma family and community goals into the strategic planning process. So I thought that was a good one to add to what we already have with the others. Okay. Category 4, links with Category 1.3 for those of you who were on the last webinar 2 weeks ago or who have done work with these categories and standards. And that is bringing the customer satisfaction data and customer input that was pulled together as part of the consumer input and involvement category and using that directly within the strategic planning process. So it talks about the documentation showing that your needs assessment has the customer feedback data, taking that and showing how you use that into your process. And it's important to note that there are two types of data shown here. One is customer satisfaction and the other is customer input. So customer satisfaction basically involves the people who you serve directly in your programs and how their views of the work that was carried out with them went down, so to speak. And you can see there are various customer satisfaction surveys. Customer input is a broader level of input, not only from those you serve, but from others, reflecting how effective your agency is in addressing the needs in your community and the results that you do, and so on. So there are two different levels there. In terms of the resources that I shared with you, again, some examples of customer surveys. You see one from West Central Minnesota, Community Action. The customers, I probably should step back. It's not just the people in your program when you get customer input. It certainly can be an internal customer, your staff, likewise your partners and stakeholders in the community. So it's a pretty broad range of participation in this area. So if you look at the second resource, collaboration checkup, you can see that actually builds out beyond the customers in your programs. The last one I put on there actually was from a really strong community action agency in Pennsylvania, the Fayette County Community Action Agency. They have quite a strong quality review process where they have different ways of gathering input from all levels of stakeholders. And I think it's a good one to look at. You may want to take something from that or build something out yourself in a similar fashion. So that's on Virtual CAP, and their materials that they use for it's available on the website as well. Okay. Okay, I see there's a question here. Will the webinar recording for developing the strategic plan be available? I'm not exactly sure which one you're referring to. I believe back here, if you look at the, I'm on standard 6.2, in the middle of that box there is a webinar available that was given both nationally and at the Illinois Community Action Conference. So that one is available. The one that I referred to that was done back in January at the Management and Leadership Conference, that was not a webinar, that was a workshop presentation. So that one, most likely, you won't be able to get a recording of that, but you can access the presentation. Okay? So the last standard under strategic plan is having an update on the progress toward meeting the goals of the strategic plan presented to the board within the past 12 months. Okay, on that one, it's not quite as quick and easy as it seems, because it's not just giving a report and saying it's done, but making sure that there is some depth there in terms of what's on track, what may not be on track, what changes are intended to help redirect the plan, and any changes in the plan itself that may be needed. Certainly, many agencies have a strategic planning committee. That's perfectly acceptable. A committee can roll their sleeves up and work continuously with the staff on tracking the progress toward meeting strategic planning goals, maybe on a quarterly or semi-annual basis, and certainly no less than a 12-month basis. But that's not sufficient. It still needs to be reported out to the board, and that needs to be documented, both showing the report that was given to the board and/or giving board minutes or confirmation that such a report was provided. Okay, so I hope that's clear, and that really covers our standards under Category 6. Once we get through these resources, I tried to pull together a few here along with what the partnership has provided that really links the board's level of involvement in with the strategic planning process. So you can see each of these really are directly talking about that. I think they're worth looking at. There aren't that many on here. The third one down, which is the first one I pulled together, talks about the continuous involvement of the board in such a process, and likewise, the last one does the same. So please share these with your board, with the appropriate committee or folks who are involved with this, and hopefully it'll be useful to you. Okay, Category 7, HR. This one is formatted slightly differently in the technical assistance guide, and in fact, that's the way that I've formatted this presentation. Rather than going through the standards in numerical order, they're in 3 separate groupings. Okay, the first grouping is policies and procedures, and you can see there are 3 standards related to that. The second grouping is HR governance, basically the board's responsibilities under this category with 2 of the standards. And the third grouping is HR management with 4 standards under that. So altogether, we'll go through them in these various groups. And the way I've set it up, of course, here is the toolkit again, the technical assistance guide, along with a link to the recording and the slides. By the way, I'll say one thing about this recording. The presenter is an HR specialist. Okay, so it's not a generalist. So if you're really needing to do some in-depth work with human resource management, this is a really good recording for that purpose.
Ken, sorry to interrupt. We still have somebody who says they can't hear you. Maybe you should switch to telephone.
Okay, I can try. Bear with me. I'm not sure I get a telephone number. Let me see. Okay, I'm gonna put a button on here that says telephone. It may cut me off temporarily. Hello? Hello?
I can hear you.
Okay, this has a hum on it, so please let me know if this is not better, and I'll go back to the other. Okay, can people hear me? Okay, I hope you can hear me. If you can't, please, I don't know. If you can't hear me, it's going to be hard for me to tell you what to do, I guess. So we'll just keep going, and if we get more messages, we'll go to Plan B. Okay, so we're on HR policies and procedures. And the first one basically is about having personnel policies, written personnel policies, that have been reviewed by an attorney and approved by the governing board within the past 5 years. So in effect, this one, certainly you want a copy of your personnel policies. I would always have dates on these policies. I often see them where they don't, so that's an important small thing that makes a big difference. Have a date of the board review when they're in effect, and any time they're updated to modify or at least show the new date of the latest approval. Certainly having some documentation from the attorney about the review and having that recorded in the board minutes is helpful as well. Okay? Well, not only is helpful, it's required, okay? There are different ways that this can happen, of course. It doesn't mean you have to pay an attorney. I was good at begging when I was CAP director. We had a lot of really good pro bono legal assistance. You go to your local bar association and make the plea, and oftentimes there's some various attorneys, some who have expertise in nonprofit bylaws, who would be approachable for that type of support. Okay. 7.2 has to do with your employee handbook or personnel policies, making sure that all staff have copies of them and that any changes that occur are provided as well to all staff members. Showing that this happens in terms of having staff sign off when they receive their personnel policies, keeping that in their personnel file, and making sure that you have some record of that, so when you're monitored, you can show that this in fact has occurred. It's also good if you have changes, putting out memos or other ways that you communicate changes and keeping those on hand as documentation. I know some agencies keep their personnel policies on their website, which is another way to ensure access to that, but you still have to have some evidence that staff, in fact, have received the policy. Okay, 7.7, again with HR policies and procedures, is the whistleblower policy. Critical policy, you'll see this come up as far as keeping up with your policies. There's some really, this came under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. I'm sure most of you remember the Enron fiasco. That trickled over really quickly into the nonprofit sector and the public sector. And it's here now as part of it as a whistleblower policy. So that should be shown in terms of a part of your personnel policies. Certainly you have to have language in it that reflects there will not be retaliation for anyone applying this policy to provide information to the appropriate point that your policy will specify. It's something your board definitely needs to vote on, okay, so approved by your board. And what I want to share with you then are some of the key resources. You'll find them under federal legislation and laws. You'll see it from the Department of Labor, from OMB. And then finally, we've put together, both the partnership and the items that I've added, some other helpful tools on building a really good whistleblower policy to meet the requirements of this standard and the legal requirements in other ways. I think the fifth bullet down, the Community Action Partnership Risk Management Portal, has a risk assessment center template that you can use with 81 questions on it. And so I encourage you to go in there. There'll be a whistleblower template in that, but you see others as well, including one from CapLaw in their Tools for Top-Notch Community Action Agencies, the second one from the bottom. And finally, we have some also in terms of employment policy and procedures in a guide at the very, very bottom that I help gather resources for called on employment policies and practices. You know, I've gone over quickly the Community Action Risk Mitigation website, which I did, I think, on the last webinar as well. Here's a blog that I put out about a year ago on the Risk Management Center, which you can access for free with a quick registration. Make it a little bigger here. The reason I'm pulling up this web page is down at the bottom here. When you're looking at your personnel policies and your whistleblower policy and all of the other areas that you want to build that you don't have now as new policies in your agency, I hope you can see on your screen the matrix that I put together of the different areas under risk management, which their online tool offers. And the second grid has a variety of policy templates that you can use. And you can see there are quite a few good ones on here. In the area of whistleblower, you see ethics. You have human resources, another area, liability shields, and it just goes on and on. So if you haven't accessed the risk mitigation tool from the partnership, this is what you have waiting for you if you need that kind of resource. Okay, back to my PowerPoint. Okay, standard 7.4 and 7.5 have to do with the board's responsibilities with the standards under Category 7. And there are really two of them. When we look at these build on the standards that are under Category 3 of board governance, and you'll see more of these as we move on to the next category as well. But the two HR areas for the board have to do with the executive director and the relationship between the board and the executive director. Standard 7.4 is making sure that a performance appraisal occurs on an annual basis or each calendar year of the CEO or executive director. And standard 7.5, which is in the middle of this slide, has to do with reviewing and approving the compensation for the CEO and executive director within every calendar year. And in fact, often Standard 7.5, in terms of assigning compensation, happens in conjunction with 7.4, the performance appraisal. So there isn't any real specific tool that's required in terms of performance appraisal. We're going to share some with you on the next slide. But documenting that this occurs in your board minutes, having board resolutions and procedures that occur is key to this particular standard, and so on. You see the examples on this slide. So there are some really good resources available. You can see the partnership has put together 6 or 8 of them, all about compensation, starting with some general standards from the Department of Labor and OMB. And then it goes into some more kind of walking through how to help set compensation for the Chief Executive Officer. The risk management portal that we just looked at on the website I showed you does have some templates on an employment agreement if your Chief Executive Officer is under contract. Also some policy templates for CEO compensation, and in the cases where this is feasible, any bonuses that might be considered in addition to the basic compensation. The Office of Head Start has a whole body of material on wage comparability. This, of course, goes beyond the Chief Executive Officer, but you might use that. And finally, one thing that I added to this was under a guide. As I mentioned, I've helped gather resources for at the very bottom, evaluating executive performance. I've received many inquiries over the years. Are there any examples of evaluation processes or forms that agencies use? So right there, if you look, you'll get some guidance and some tools that hopefully will be good for you to take advantage of. And then finally, the last 4 standards under human resources has to do with HR management. And this is, I think this is organized in a good way in that it really touches on all of the different aspects of HR management. It goes from job descriptions to performance evaluation, then to staff orientation and staff development and training. So there's really a good continuum here for you to use effectively as you work with your personnel. And the first one has to do with job descriptions. And truthfully, this is an area I've seen over the years that many agencies are kind of slack on, if I may use the word. In fact, it was really challenging for my own agency to make sure that we have up-to-date job descriptions and that we have them across the agency in a way that allows for some comparability. So I think this is really an important one to have a strong organization. Job descriptions, you can see how to document it, to identify through a listing of what your positions are, to have a book. I would suggest a booklet where all your job descriptions are available, and then showing the date on the job description when that was actually adopted. Okay, using a standard template is down on the next grouping there, bullet number 3. I think that's really important so you don't have 5 programs that all have different formats for their job descriptions, okay, unless it's a unique type of position, and so on. Standard 7.6 has to do with the next piece, and that is performance appraisal, making sure you have a policy in place for evaluation of your employees. Showing what that policy is will have you in compliance. Certainly then going beyond compliance is actually tracking the effectiveness of your process in terms of timeliness of evaluations, the relevance of the evaluations, and the improvements that occur as a result of areas needing further training or staff development. And certainly the positive aspects of it, what some of the key accomplishments are, best practices you might say as well. So it's not just having a process, but of course it's putting that process into action. But to comply, what you need to have is the policy. Okay? The third standard under this area of HR has to do with employee orientation. This specifies within 60 days of hire, having a standard orientation process, both having a policy to do it and then showing that employees are attending the orientation. Okay, and you have different ways you can document that. The last standard under this area has to do with staff development and training, conducting and making available training, including that on Roma, on an ongoing basis. So documenting that through your training plans. Those of you who run Head Start programs obviously know there's a very specific way for you to document this. Building that out for your whole agency would be a good approach to documenting your training plans. Having copies of the trainings that are carried out, as well as attendance that particular employees have in other training opportunities, whether it's workshops, classes, conferences, and so on. So under effective HR management, there's a group of resources here. If you take a look, you can see sample individual development plan, the third one down, is a good one to help document as part of training and staff development, keeping that in personnel files and on a program and organizational level, have that tracked. The Quality Community Action System from the New England Community Action Associations have some good material in terms of having Roma integrated as part of the staff development. If you remember, Roma was mentioned as one of the focus areas for staff development and training. The partnership has put together a guide on human resources, good tool. And finally, I keep going back to the nonprofit risk management portal that we looked at a couple of times here. There are some templates there for employee reviews and so on. The very last one I found just recently, and I thought it was a really neat approach. This agency in Wisconsin, Indian Head Community Action Agency, actually has a video that they did. It's a YouTube video where they give a great overview of their organization. So when new employees come on, they can quickly screen this video for them. If you want to take a look at it, it might give you some good pointers that you might want to create your own orientation video, not only for your staff, but for your board, or you might modify it and have it for other uses as well. Okay, I'm still tracking this, that audio is, some people are having an audio. Sometimes it says it's cut out and now it's back on. So please let us know, even though if you can't hear me, you don't know that I just said that, which is kind of unusual, but I mean, it's understood. Please, maybe we could put out a message, Peggy, and let people know to let us know whether they can hear or not. Okay, category 8. This one I need to take a really deep breath for because I have a quick disclaimer on this one. I am not a content area specialist on financial operations and oversight, but I can share with you the multiple standards that are under here and the resources that we've put together for them. But if you have particular questions on the nuts and bolts of this, certainly ask your auditor, seek out information from other agencies, or shoot me an email and I'll do what I can to track down some support for you as well. Okay? So the first 5 standards here have to do with audit. And we all know what audits are about, okay? There's your toolkit and your webinar recording. And here we go. So the first one, 8.1, is that you basically have your audit completed by a CPA and meeting all the federal and state audit requirements. Pretty straight up, I would say. How do you document it? You have your audit, right? And you submit it in a timely manner, showing that it's been received by the Federal Clearinghouse and other state and federal agencies that you're required to submit it to. So the basic resources for that, of course, are the Uniform Administrative Requirements for federal awards, The partnership has a webinar on audit essentials. Another guide that I was working with is the Guide to Financial Management, Mastering Financial Management. Unit 6 in that guide. I need to put a link on there. I'll make a note of that, but you can certainly access it directly through the other link you see there. And finally, cap law. Those of you working in the fiscal area hopefully have accessed cap law's extensive guide on governance and financial excellence. I found oftentimes doing a keyword search in that guide is helpful, and I did that and came up with the 3 bullets under that I felt were pertinent to the audit process. You can see them listed there. Okay, still on the audit, it's basically making sure that the findings from your prior year audits have been recognized by your agency and addressed where it's necessary to do so based on what your assessment is. So oftentimes that's a reply letter acknowledging the findings and indicating what the corrective actions are related to those findings. So we go back and we see the same resources for the first 2. I added some new ones to the Guide on Financial Management and Administrative Governance, both the fieldwork section there, talking directly about addressing potential findings and concerns from your audit, as well as what's within the audit report related to the management letter. And likewise, under the cap law toolkit, I did a keyword search and came up with the management letters and where that's located within that guide. So these are good, sort of gives you some glimpses of what you may be facing and how to best take a look at it and build a good plan of action to address these findings. Okay, still have the audit, and this one is that it's presented to the governing board. So an interesting thing about this is agencies, of course, often have an audit committee or other mechanism of the board, perhaps the board's finance committee or other committee works on it. That's perfectly all right to have a committee involved with this, but please recognize that that's not sufficient, that the report still needs to go and be presented to the governing board. There's probably going to be more detail addressed at a committee level, and a summary report then is sufficient to go to the board. And again, looking at the webinar at the bottom, we're back to the same webinar that we've been seeing related to the audit. And you can see the documentation, the different forms of it. Okay. And next one under audit, this one and one more, is that the board receives and accepts the audit. You can certainly show that through the board meetings reflecting it. And this one I think is pretty straight up. And finally, 8.5. This one is an important one. A lot of agencies have the same auditor year after year after year, and the key to this is to making sure that formal bids are solicited within the past 5 years. And doing that, you show your request for proposals, your RFPs, you show who it was sent out to, and then how they were evaluated in terms of the scores and the evaluation sheets that you use for that. Okay. There's an example of an RFP, request for audit services from an agency in Michigan there. We do have in the Guide for Financial Management and Administrative Governance a whole section on auditors, including preparing an RFP, which has several sample RFPs in there, so hopefully that'll be useful. How to identify your qualified bidders, and then there's a sample evaluation form and how to check references in that auditor selection from the guide, the third item down. And lastly, the cap law toolkit, again, through the search I found 3 items, and particularly Appendix C, an RFP from the auditors, a checklist that you can use. So I think these are all very practical, hands-on tools that'll be helpful to you. Okay. And that's it for the 5 related to the audit. The next set have to do with IRS and basic compliance issues, okay? So 990, I know every agency, I'm hoping, without exception, is already very familiar with the 990. Besides completing it, making it available to your board for review is part of this standard. It doesn't mean that a copy has to be sent out to every board member. They can delegate somebody to actually have a full review of it, but still the whole board has to have access to the report. Some agencies actually put their 990 on their website. I see that as I go around various websites. So it is a way to promote transparency. It's also a way to promote access to the 990. And you can see under documentation all those ways that I just mentioned. Okay. Of course, the IRS is a great resource when you're talking about 990. And in the Guide to Financial Management Administrative Governance, there's a section on Form 990 with some other groups who have put together material such as Board Source, which you may be familiar with, and others, and then Cap Law back on that one. So, of course, there are a lot of the similar resources as we go through these standards under the financial area. Okay, the next group are involved with the governing board. The 8.7 is basically making sure that your board gets financial reports at every meeting, each regular meeting, I should say. If you have a special meeting, executive session, well, that wouldn't be a separate meeting, but if you have a special meeting, that wouldn't be regular. But at any rate, at your monthly meetings, if you have them on that basis, and they have to have 2 parts to them, your financial reports. One has to be an organization-wide report on revenue and expenditures. And you're basically looking at comparing budget to actual categorized by program, not necessarily by funding source, okay? You can still have separate program reports. You could have more reports than these. But item number 1 is an organization-wide report comparing budget to actual, categorized by program. Item 2 is a balance sheet showing your assets and liabilities and the difference between them, your net worth. So those 2 must go to the board. Again, you can have more. Obviously, the documentation has to do with your board agenda, your board packet, your minutes, any other way that you document that the board has received this material. As far as the resources go, we go back to some of the financial information for board items. Item number 4 there that I put on was from one of the Cap Law pieces. Look at section 4, looking at getting financial statements together and how to present them. And finally, doing analysis and reports from the guide that I've spoken a few times on financial management and administrative governance. What's good about that list, I thought, is if you take in what I said, that the 2 in the standard are to comply with the standard, you can do more than that, okay? So you take a look at the various reports here. Cash flow is certainly a common one that agencies have. They may not all go to your board necessarily, but certainly from a management standpoint, many of these are important to keep track of, I would say. Certainly the last 2, your ratios and trends, are something you want to look at over time to see how you're faring with your financial stability. Okay, so I hope the fiscal folks on this session, we saw we had a handful there, we'll also find some useful tools here to add to help you do your work. Okay, back on government regulations, 8.8. These are all the good things, your income tax filing, your withholding, unemployment tax, your state income taxes, retirement plans, and so on and so forth, making sure that everything that has a deadline to be filed is done on time. Now, I can't look you in the eye when I say this, but I have at workshops that I've given, is agencies have been shut down who have not done their reporting and their filings on time. I mean, literally shut down. You don't mess with the IRS, do you? Okay. So I wish, we could be in the same room together and hear some of the stories that we prefer not to hear, and make sure that each of you are on top of this, have schedules to keep, to track how you're doing, which you can certainly then share as you're reviewed for compliance with this particular area. Okay, standard 8.9 is your board approving an organization-wide budget. This is something that I don't believe has universally been done, but it needs to be now. And that is giving a really good picture of the entire operations of your organization from a financial standpoint. It helps in different ways. It helps reflect where the resources are coming from, what priorities they're relating to with your planning and your priorities in your agency. There are some good tools that I'll share with you to help you if you haven't done this yet, or if you want to revamp how you're working it. This doesn't necessarily replace, it certainly doesn't replace program budgets. You still need to have them for a management standpoint. Okay, and one interesting thing that most agencies deal with is your programs don't always have the same fiscal year collectively. So how you build that into an organization-wide budget is something to think through carefully. Okay, so one thing that I'll share with you real quickly, if you look at the one right in the middle, the agency-wide budget from Unit 4 in that guide that I've talked about on almost every one of these slides, the last two bullets there have to do with an agency-wide budget workbook that's in that guide, as well as a template fully formatted that will help you generate your own agency-wide budget by putting your own data in. So I didn't really highlight these anymore on each slide, but if you have your handout copy, you might want to put a little check or star by that. Take a look and see if that would be useful to you. You can see at the very top, the partnership did record a webinar on organization-wide budgets. I noticed, however, it's not functional in certain browsers. I don't know, Firefox, one I use often, maybe it didn't work in that one, but it might have worked in Google Chrome or Internet Explorer, etc. So I've made that note there in case you get frustrated the first time you try it. Okay.
Ken,
yeah.
we do have a question. She's been waiting a while too.
Okay, give it to me. I'm ready.
Okay.
Where is? Mm-hmm.
Can the reporting be by larger department, for example, the budget for the entire housing department, rather than one of the many small programs that we braid together?
Well, I don't work for the state CSBG office, so I can't give a definitive answer there. I think, what I'm trying to do is say that's going to be something to discuss with your state CSBG contacts. I would like to see that, but I don't know. It may not be. So I'm sorry, I can't say yes or no. I think it's a good idea. I think you may want to start with that. Certainly compile it anyway, because housing is such a major area for many agencies, to show the level of effort that an agency has put together, just as an example. I think it's an interesting question, so I would pursue that, because it could fall over into other categories, whether it's asset development, education, all the various significant categories. When you're doing strategic planning and programming, seeing the resources, I think, has value. So whether it's acceptable for compliance or not, I think it's a good idea. So I'm sorry I can't do better than that, but I hope it's helpful. Okay, thank you, Peggy. Yeah, I'm having a hard time seeing the questions as I'm presenting, so feel free to jump in as we go along here. Okay, so board oversight, went through the agency-wide budget, and you can see the various resources there. 8.10, 8.10, and so on has to do with your policies and procedures. To review your fiscal policies by your staff within the past 2 years and update them, and changes getting approved by your board. Okay, and you can see the documentation that's required on there. Cap law has a good body of information on model policies if you're looking for them. Back to the guide that I talked about in every slide, you can see the first bullet is we've put together some core topics you might want to address in your fiscal policies. We have some templates and samples there, and also gave a distinction between what a policy is versus a procedure. Okay. If you look on the first bullet, the uniform administrative requirements, there's some really good delineations there of specific procedures that they require. And I'm not going to go through them all, but things like record retention, conflict of interest, property records, and so on. So those of you working in the fiscal area and certainly with your auditors' guidance, you can see other types of policies that you'd want to include in that. 8.11 has to do with procurement policy, which I just mentioned is part of the Uniform Administrative Requirements, that having a written procurement policy, making sure your board reviews it within the past 5 years, and how you document that, which is pretty typical with your board. A copy of the policy and showing a documentation in your board minutes that it's been reviewed. So cap law gives you a model procurement policy, and back to that guide, we have a section on purchasing, and I'm going to go over these slides and make sure the direct link is in each one. This one happens to have it. So we have provided some sample procurement policies, different procedures by cost threshold, and how you have a schedule put together with your authorizations. Okay, two more under fiscal. 8.12 is your shared cost, how you allocate shared cost, whether you have an indirect cost rate, meaning an approved indirect cost rate, or whether you have a documented written cost allocation plan. Key area, get in a lot of trouble if you don't have this done properly. Okay, so if you look at the bottom, examples of documentation, one is, as I mentioned, having an approved, or here it calls it a negotiated federal cost rate, and a copy of that letter from the cognizant agency, which basically you need one agency that's designated at the federal level to accept and approve your rate, and then all other federal agencies would abide by that. If you don't have an approved rate, you have to have the methodology for how you have developed your indirect cost plan. The third bullet I'm not that familiar with, I will admit. It's called the de minimis indirect cost rate. It's something new. The cap law has some material on it I'll share with you. Apparently it's a way where you don't have to have a negotiated cost rate, a negotiated approved one, but instead you get another basis for creating an indirect cost rate. I wish I knew this when I was a cap director. It's new, so it didn't exist then, but I encourage you to keep track of it. So here are the resources. You can see the partnership and cap law have a bunch out on this. They also have a model cost allocation plan and some proposals there from different entities if you want to pursue that. Okay. Cap law's super circular webinar series. If you look at the second bullet there under ins and outs of indirect costs, that's the one that I said is apparently potentially going to be available to you. So if you want to learn about that, it was new to me when I did this research, so I think it's something to hear more about. So the cap law material, and finally in the guide again, mastering financial management and governance, looking at classifying expenses and how you do that in terms of looking at direct expenses and indirect expenses and so on. So this is a lot, I realize that, but I hope you'll refer back to these slides and access the links. And if any trouble with any link, please, you'll have my email on the opening slide, my phone number. Just let me know and I'll get that for you right away. Okay?
Ken, we do have another question or a request.
Okay, I'm ready.
It's a request. She's asked for an example of how you tie the budget to the strategic plan. That's important and a good question. I think, it's interesting actually.
I was just actually approached by an agency 2 days ago to potentially do some work with them on the strategic plan. And one thing I was thinking about, there's a great matrix that shows mission, relevance, and financial stability. In other words, if you can imagine a grid with 4 boxes in it, 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom, and put mission across the top and put financial strength across the side. And so you have 4 different places. And where I'm going with this is, if you have a program that is very highly relevant to the mission of your organization, that's going to be on the right-hand side because it's higher to your mission. If it's strong financially, it'll be in the grid at the upper right-hand corner. Where I'm going with this is, overlay where you are financially or where you're putting your resources with what you see are the most mission-critical parts of your programming, and see if it's aligned. And then there's a good tool on this. There's a book that gives you, it's not expensive, I think it's like $25 or something, that gives you a way to plot that out on an Excel spreadsheet, and it comes out really cool in a way to see, these are my agency priorities, this is where my resources go, where are the disconnects. Now, I would hope that in most cases when you're pursuing substantial funding, it's for something of high value to your agency. So, I mean, that's kind of a simple way to put it. But I guess aligning your budgets and your resources with your program priorities, to me, is sort of a linear process, at least to start. So I wish we could have more engagement on it, because it's hard to just talk into a telephone and seeing if we have further conversation that would be helpful. I do have a question here. Can I send you the grid? I'll tell you what, I will definitely put it out. I'll make a note of this. It's called Nonprofit Sustainability, and I will send it to you. I think there's also webinars, which if I can find the link, I'll try to send that as well. So thank you for that question. So where am I at? Okay, the last standard under, let me see something here. Hold on. Yeah, okay, the last standard under financial policies and procedures is a written policy for record retention and destruction. Boy, this is an interesting one, because when I was reading about it, I really encourage you to fully read the TA guides, technical assistance guides, because this one doesn't only talk about how long to keep them, but it also suggests you should have a maximum time. In other words, when do you get rid of them? Because you really don't want to have all this documentation around eternally somewhere off in a storage room. You need to really be active with maintaining what your records are, and with not maintaining them when you don't need them anymore. So first of all, it's part of the IRS 990 asking a question whether you have a record retention and destruction policy. Okay, so something to really think through carefully. You know, we had a basement in our office, and there was a lot of old files in there. They probably should have been gotten rid of. I hope by now they have been, but there wasn't any real methodical, excuse me, I'm getting tongue-tied here, methodical way to do that, and that's what this is all about. So you see Cap Law has a sample policy. The risk management portal, we looked at the website, has a template on that. Why not go to that right away, see how it'll fit with what you're doing, and fill in what you need for your own. You'll comply with this. And then, of course, you have to carry it out. Okay? And you can see the National Council of Nonprofits has other ones. So these are just a few, but I think they're good ones that'll get you there. Okay. Trying to stay on time here. We have 4 more standards under the last category, your data and analysis. Okay. Category 9, there's your toolkit and webinar recording. The first one should not be new. All of you do the IS reporting. So looking at having a system, or it don't have to be one, you may have various ones in your programs, but tracking and reporting your client demographics and services. So again, this is not new. It basically is what you've been doing, but making sure you have it documented on what that system is. And you can see the examples. Of course, no surprise, the instructions for the IS report are there, those of you involved with that. There was a group put together a panel of community action representatives to look at client tracking systems. And they've issued a report, so you see the link there. It's a review of the database systems that various states and agencies throughout our network have developed. So that's a good report to give you a glimpse of the different approaches at this, okay? All this area of data analysis relates to Information Memorandum 49, which hopefully you have at your fingertips, and if not, there it is. It has to do with Roma implementation, and data and analysis is certainly a big part of that. I thought the second to last one there from Map TechWorks is a useful one. It gives you good ideas on how to actually review different types of software options that you may have. They're not a vendor, okay, so using their material might be really useful to you if you're looking at developing or building in some new systems. And then finally, I've been asked over the years what database systems agencies use, so I've just put together this kind of working list. It's not exhaustive, but I think there are a good, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 of them on there. And of course, when you look at that, get in touch with the agency or the vendor and ask them for some agencies that are using it so you can learn more about them, what kind of support they offer, how effective it is, et cetera, et cetera. 9.2 gets right into Roma, how you're tracking the family, agency, and or community outcomes. Remember our strategic plan and, of course, Roma. Okay, so the key word here, besides the three elements of this, are outcomes. I hope you're not, if that's not an overused word, because it's a fundamental word in this day and age. So tracking the results, first of all, targeting results, and then tracking the progress that you have toward those outcomes. You know, what happens as a result of your work? What changes are you able to identify as a result of your work? So oftentimes you use scales to show this. Oftentimes you show actual outcomes as opposed to a continuum. We go back, you see the first two are the same from the last slide. I thought there was an interesting body of material here from Colorado Work Support Strategies, measuring client well-being. And finally, I should have a drum roll for this. I hope everyone on the call and every agency in Oregon knows about the upcoming series of webinars that are being held on the rollout of Roma Next Generation. It's been in the works for a while, and this month there are a series of webinars on the rollout. So truthfully, what I have on here somewhat is going to be quickly outdated, the last two bullets about Roma, as soon as these webinars and the recommendations are sent into OCS. And specifically, there's going to be a comment period for your agencies to review and comment on the proposals for Roma Next Gen. So you can view the webinars. They'll be available as recordings. Really good for you to get plugged into that. 9.3 is presenting an analysis of your outcomes to your governing board, any adjustments you're going to make, improvements, et cetera, within the past 12 months to your board for review or action. So basically documenting that a presentation has been made, perhaps having this starting at a committee level or certainly a staff level at a minimum, and presenting it to the board and documenting that the board has both received the report and approved any adjustments that may occur. So I would certainly suggest the second one there, the technical assistance guide on this standard, and it talks about ways to do that. It's really good. We have a section in the Striving for Excellence resource guide for boards, achievement of results, part of the Roma element there, as well as evaluation. There's a section on analyzing outcome info and using your data. And finally, University of Wisconsin Extension has some good stuff on planning and evaluation. And the piece here is on outcome data analysis. So all this, I think, would be a way for you to get a leg up on gathering your information on your outcomes, putting it into a good analysis for your board to review. And finally, Standard 9.4, this one is really, you're doing it. I hope you're doing it effectively and timely, and that is getting your IS data collected, reflecting demographics and your outcomes, and submitting it on time. You can see the IM 49 and 102 at the bottom as your resources. So those are the last 4 categories with all the standards we covered today. As I did last time, I hope you'll become familiar, if you're not already, with Virtual CAP. This is a flyer you can access to show you all the tools that are on there. You can see it's a live link, so if you just click on it, you'll get the front and back for a 2-page flyer. We've been putting out a new publication. The second one of this year just came out yesterday, called Virtual CAP Roundup. Those of you who are interested, let me know. We have some material showing the articles that have been in it, etc. Happy to share that with you. It's a way to help sustain Virtual CAP and at the same time get agencies up to date on what's going on in community action across the country. We usually have about 30 or so articles on 5 different subjects, focus topics, funding, innovative programs, and so on. So I encourage you to consider that and keep up with us, follow us, all that good stuff. And that's about it. Came in a little bit early. If you have further questions, what I understand I need to do so far is get some more of those links in, check the partnerships links for their national tools, the links on the Mastering Financial Administrative Guide that I've spoken of, and the matrix on nonprofit sustainability. So I will send that out. And anything else, feel free to get in touch. I really appreciate having your time today. So let's see, any other questions or comments? I do have a final poll. Maybe I should do that real quickly. And we certainly hope you'll complete our evaluation form to help us add whatever other materials or hear from you. Okay, so here we're asking you, what is your confidence in being able to comply with the standards at this point? Okay. How are we doing here? Getting there. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds and we'll pull that together. Okay, very good. So let's share that with you. Okay, so I guess what we're looking at is a lot of folks feel reasonably good about it, with a few areas that need to have some really sleeves rolled up to put together what's required. And when you reply to the evaluation survey, if you want to put any specifics in, we're happy to try to add to what we've already done. So any questions, comments? Have a few minutes. I've already had my lunch on the East Coast here.
Well, we did have one agency that had quite a few problems with their audio fading in and out. Okay. And I think it was an issue with they were using their computer audio, so maybe next time they should try calling in on the telephone line. And if anyone else has had that problem, that might help also, to use the telephone line instead of your computer.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that.
We'll be getting a recording out to everyone in the next week or two, or a link to the recordings for both of these webinars, so you'll be able to view them and listen to them again. You
know, I do see a question here, Peggy, about having webinars on specific topics. And I guess we can say, I don't have the dates in front of me, but information will go out, that we have several upcoming in, I think, April, May, and June, if I'm not mistaken. The one in April, I believe, is on self-sufficiency and economic security, where we look at the whole notion of helping families, individuals and families move towards self-sufficiency. And what is self-sufficiency? So that's the April webinar. May, I believe we're on evidence-based practices, how to work with evidence-based practices, build them into your agency. And then June is on collective impact, building a concerted effort within your community, and I would say even within your agency, but let's say within your community, to address particular problems with shared goals and shared roles. So it's deeper than partnerships and collaboration. So collective impact is the May webinar.
Oh, actually, collective impact is June.
That's right. May is evidence-based practices.
Correct.
June is collective impact. Okay.
And I'll be sending out a save the date on these 3 webinars soon. For any of you who aren't on our training distribution list, if you could send me an email, and I can certainly add you to our list so that you receive any updates on trainings.
Okay. Okay, anything else? We're rolling out here, almost 11:30 Pacific time.
I don't see any more questions.
Okay, well, again, thank you to CAPO and to DHCS and to all of you. Look forward to hearing from you if I could be of any future help. Okay.
Thank you, Ken, and we hope you all enjoyed the webinar. I'll be sending out a link soon to a survey. If you could please give us your feedback, we'd really appreciate. I'll be doing it right after the webinar's over. So thank you for all joining us today, and have a great day.
Okay. Okay, goodbye.